What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we're diving into a top 10 mock for the NFL draft, little draft day primer. Yep, primer. We got that covered. We got that copyrighted. So we're going to be talking about some fun here, some rumors, some draft bets, going a little bit on the podcast stuff, going over kind of some over-unders like we used to do, a little old school, little TDR old school there. But let's start with the third quarterback selected. Let's start going over that. All these odds are from DraftKings. And so who do you think, when you think of third quarterback, Drake Maye's at minus 145, Jaden Daniels at plus 145, JJ at plus 300. Where are you leaning with the third quarterback selected, Jeff?
For a long time, it's and really what this question is disguised as who's the Commanders going to take, because whoever they don't take, between really it's going to be Drake Maye and Jaden Daniels. I would have to believe that between the two of them, whoever doesn't go is going to be the third quarterback picked. JJ McCarthy's lingering out there at plus 300 odds. Right now, Drake Maye is the favorite to be the third quarterback selected, which would imply that the Commanders are going to take Jaden Daniels with the number 2 pick. But we've seen line movement in that market. When you look like early last week to the middle of last week, it was heavy towards Jaden Daniels being that pick at number 2, and it's really swung. And at one point, I believe it might have even swung even between Drake Maye and Jaden Daniels as being that number 2 overall pick. And I flash back to a year ago, and I keep flashing back to a year ago, the way that CJ Stroud saw movement as that number 2 pick, and Will Levis at one point, I don't know if he got to being the favorite to be the number 2 pick, but I know there was a lot of smoke around that. And so I think while we're going to talk about a lot of betting lines tonight, and that's a lot of interesting information, and it can illustrate, especially once you get into over unders, because you look at where those teams that are sitting right at that pick and kind of inflection points if a team wants to go up and get that player, that kind of illustrates a little bit where teams would have to move to. But as much as we want to rely on Las Vegas, and they probably are right more than often than they're not, that's why those buildings are so big. It's really a crapshoot right now in terms of the NFL draft. We don't exactly know where things are going to lie, and we saw that last year. I know at one point Tyree Wilson, the defensive end that ended up going 8th to the Raiders, was a favorite to be the number 2 player off the board, I believe, even then.
That's an important thing to note. Vegas doesn't know everything. I will say the over-under lines traditionally are fairly close. So those are the ones, if you're out there betting or something like that, those are the ones I would pay attention to more than the position of at your position, like this one, for example. This will move all the way up until, Thursday morning at probably 9 a.m. There's going to be a huge shift. It happens every year. I think it happened last year. I think you're right that Levis got close to being the favorite, but I don't think he might have been the favored quarterback at the time, or Stroud had dropped to even odds with him, or whatever it may be. But as far as this question goes, I struggle because I think there's been a lot of boosting up of 2 of these quarterbacks into a Drake Maye tier, and a lot of talk about how the NFL is worried about Drake Maye. Why is he inaccurate at times? The smoke has been just very present this draft season, and so I think there's a real chance that the plus odds on Jaden Daniels is the better bet here. I think there's a chance that the Commanders do prefer Drake Maye, and after going through their process, the reason that the odds moved so much is because Jaden Daniels went into that visit with the group of other top prospects, specifically the quarterbacks. If you don't know that story, they brought in all of the top 5, I believe, outside of Caleb Williams, the top 5 quarterbacks, to do a group visit to see how they interacted in a group setting, and kind of, I think they took him to Topgolf or something like that. But Jaden Daniels was allegedly not very happy with that process, and Jaden Daniels' agent made that apparent on Twitter. So I wonder if this is kind of a move for Daniels. Didn't really vibe with them. Maybe they like Daniels still, but maybe there's a chance that he just doesn't want to go there, which that's fair. That's fair. Anyone who doesn't want to go to Washington, I don't blame them. I understand. So to me, if I were betting this, I'd go Jaden Daniels.
And anybody doesn't want to go to Topgolf, I don't blame you either. That shit is overrated and it is terrible. Like I'm not paying that money for Top Golf. I'm not going out there and rolling there. So I get that part. To me, it comes down to Jaden or JJ. Which one's Will Levis to you? Like which one might drop? Like which one is that guy that's like not going to be there? We've been hearing a lot of smoke. I don't know if it's really smoke or not about some things about Jaden Daniels a little bit in terms of kind of his like maybe I don't want to say attitude because everybody will just jump on that, but kind of just like is he going to be a guy that you can build around? I just remember, do you guys remember, we're old, so we used to watch Arizona State for some reason. And do you remember when he left? Teammates were really excited about Jaden Daniels leaving. Like they were like, yeah, he's finally gone. I remember all the videos and stuff. Now, this is like a draft day, didn't show up to his birthday party kind of scenario thing that I'm kind of mentioning here. And it might be all mute because he goes number 2 overall. But I think there is that about him. I haven't heard that a lot about Drake in terms of what, his approach to the game and those type of things. I would, just for the odds, I'd slip in JJ maybe. I think it'd be fun to see if JJ goes there and goes ahead in that third QB, and Jaden maybe dips a little bit. But that's how I would kind of lean there. Any final thoughts on this, Jeff?
I'm a little bit curious because I know Christian talked about the negative smoke around Drake May and the positive smoke around some of these other players. And so part of me wonders if Washington being a very inexperienced ownership group and a relatively inexperienced new general manager, if there are not other teams that are using some of their connections in the media to cast doubt into the Commander's mind on who should be the pick. Because I've said for a while now that if you look back at decades of NFL history, Drake May would be the slam dunk number 2 pick and wouldn't even think twice about it. And I can't help but wonder if there's not some strings being pulled because we see media serves multiple purposes. And one of the purposes could be to get messages out to influence the decision-making of somebody that maybe is less confident. And I wonder if that's the case. My other thought is, but did Michael Penix have any chance of being the Commanders? Like if Michael Penix would have crushed that weekend and just blown everybody away, are they gonna take Michael Penix number 2 in the draft? Are they gonna decide to take Marvin Harrison Jr. number 2 and try to trade around for Michael Penix? It's funny to me that he would be invited. I'm pulling for him, and you guys know I've been a Penix fan for a long time, but it just cracked me up when I saw he was included in that because I don't know what he could have done to influence and be the ultimate selection there.
I would argue that was their testing. Like, are we sold on any of these guys? Are we more sold on Penix? And if we are, can we take Marvin Harrison Jr. here at 2 and then use our other picks and move up and go get Penix in the back of the first or something like that, or even just wait until the second because I think he'll be there. But I don't think that's happening. But I think in the line of thinking that Washington has been deploying, that is what would make sense in my head for what they're trying to do. I'm trying to make sense in my head of what they're doing by bringing all the top quarterbacks in to the same meeting. And I believe it was like a full night, and I don't know if they stayed the night and then also went to the facilities the next day. It's just Washington's doing things. Yeah, they're just doing things in a very strange way this year.
I wonder if they marked down like who fell asleep first and then like who didn't like brush their teeth. Like I wonder if that's how we did it. That's how they rated them there on top of that. All right, we're going to get into more. We're going to be looking at over under. We're going to be looking at odds for all of that. But rookie guide, it is coming out. It hasn't been done yet because we don't know landing spots. But as soon as it's done, these 3 gentlemen that you see on the screen or you're listening to on the podcast, we'll be 15 to 20 hours deep this weekend by ourselves, probably over 60 hours putting in this week, trying to get you guys ready for your rookie drafts immediately on that Monday and Tuesday after the drafts, because I know all you degenerates like the draft. So we'll be doing that, guiding you on where would you go, mock draft, rankings, all of the above there. And make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. You never miss an episode. Leave a 5-star review on podcasts. Haven't had a few of those lately, so let's get out there. Ask us a question in the comments.
Also, be sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to get a premium subscription. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty, IDP, and salary cap and best ball content for less than $70 annually. Head to footballguys.com/plans to join today. And do that because we certainly are not going to get Top Golf as a sponsor now after Kevin's ringing endorsement to start the show off. So make sure you sign up.
Yeah, my bad. We'll get something else going there. All right, 3rd wide receiver selected. Here are the odds for the 3rd wide receiver selected. Rome Odunze, is at minus 350. Malik Neighbors at plus 310, and Brian Thomas Jr. at plus 1500 sitting out there. Interesting. I think, in terms of everybody thinks it's going to be Malik and Marvin Harrison at the top. Have you seen anything to kind of sway you there, Christian, that's not going to be kind of how it rolls? Then it's going to be Rome at 3. We've seen this before, though, right? We've seen guys pop up. Henry Ruggs, for example, some other guys that we've seen in the wide receivers just come out of nowhere. The Raiders are close. They're sitting there in the top 13-ish. Where are you at?
I mean, shoot, plus 310 for Neighbors when we've talked about Odunze, Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison Jr. all kind of, maybe not all in the same tier, but definitely those two in the same tier. I think there's a reason that the odds are this way, and that's because I think Vegas believes that the Giants are going to miss out on a quarterback, and they're going to go for speed and go for Neighbors. And so there's no shot that Odunze would go ahead of him. But when you start to look at the construct of that team and what type of wide receiver might be needed, it actually fits Odunze a little bit better. And so I think if I were a betting man, I am, but I'm not going to advocate for that on this channel. I'll probably get yelled at. I would throw a few dollars on Malik Neighbors at plus 310 because I think I think those two are interchangeable, and I think we've heard enough from a ton of plugged-in NFL guys. I mean, I think Daniel Jeremiah in his very first top 50 or top 100, whatever he's put, I believe top 50, and in his first mock draft had Odunze ahead of Neighbors. And when you start to he puts on those, especially the mock drafts, what he's hearing, not necessarily what he believes. So I think Odunze has as good a shot as Neighbors to be the second wide receiver selected.
I wonder if it's going to be the Giants, if there's any residual LSU wide receiver, Odell Beckham, big personality, backwash off of that at all on there versus looking at Odunze as maybe a little bit more of a cleaner prospect in some of those off the field questions. That would be my thought on that. But I think scheme wise, I think you make a great point scheme wise. And I think that's one of the most important things. And that's kind of, it illustrates and it colors one of my big questions about this draft on the different, there's a lot of wide receiver talent, but when you start to distill it down into who's going to fit into what schemes, it starts to get a little bit thinner in terms of what's actually going to be team fits. And so I think the biggest question in this draft is going to be, is the second round full of wide receivers? Is the back of the first round full of wide receivers? Kind of where does that trickle effect start to go? And I think that's going to be really interesting, especially for fantasy football. And especially if you're somebody that a player going in the first round means a whole lot more than a player maybe going 5 picks later in the second round, then it might be a really interesting draft in that regard for these wide receivers.
Yeah, it really just comes down to, to me, where those wide receivers are, where the tier is for NFL teams. Because we kind of have tiers where we think that for fantasy purposes, we've all kind of talked about these guys. But, when you were talking about over-unders last week, we were kind of going over those initial Circa Sports stuff. I mean, some guys out there, Brian Thomas, 17.5, right? Like some of these other guys that you're like, hey, they popped up. Maybe, Dunze is there. Maybe a team like the Chargers really likes him there. And that's interesting. I think the Chargers are interesting. We talked about last week. Harbaugh watched these guys too. So Harbaugh was definitely on the sidelines for Washington. So he's seen them. Not so much Neighbors. So maybe that plays a role too. He saw maybe the good or the bad, depending on where they were at with that. I don't mind throwing some money on Neighbors a little bit, maybe put in a parlay or something, in terms of that, just because we've seen teams do this. They've jumped, players like, whoa, where did they come from? I think Xavier Worthy is out there and people can snide and snicker and do all this stuff, but teams love his profile. Like they like how fast he is. I don't think he'll be second or third wide receiver taken, but it's interesting to think about kind of how those wide receivers will jump up there. Number 3 pick. So we're going to kind of work through a mock as we kind of go and talk about these things. So we kind of talked about third wide receiver, third quarterback. Now, if we're sitting at the number 3 pick, we've kind of mentioned this already, but here are the odds. Drake Maye's at minus 145. Jaden Daniels at plus 155. JJ plus 320. Marvin Harrison Jr. plus 2,200. That's a big number. And I just saw Christian just ran to his phone right now to download DraftKings. Where are you at with this one, Christian?
We talked about it a little bit pre-show, but I don't think the Patriots should take a quarterback. I've kind of maintained that throughout this process. I don't think they added enough to the team to really justify putting them in a situation that Kendrick Bourne is their wide receiver one. Demario Douglas is their other wide receiver. That said, I think they're going to, and that, clearly the Vegas also thinks that. So if I had to bet, I mean, right now I think Drake May is a commander, and maybe I'm led astray here. So if that's the case, is Jaden Daniels the guy that you want sitting behind Jacoby Brissett? Probably. And reports indicated that Daniels and the Patriots had a really good pre-draft meeting. So I think that would be the move. But I also look at JJ McCarthy. I look at the Tom Brady lines. I look at winning culture, and NFL teams care more about wins than I do. And so JJ McCarthy at plus 320 is certainly interesting here. Like you were saying earlier, Kevin, I think there's a non-zero chance that Jaden Daniels starts to slip a little bit and everyone's a little confused. Teams love JJ McCarthy. I can't hammer that home enough that teams are infatuated by JJ McCarthy's profile, even if fantasy Twitter specifically is not.
And that just feels like if you're Bob Kraft and you've got a chance here to draft a national championship winning quarterback from Michigan that has all the physical tools, I mean, that feels pretty tailor-made for the pick there. It's you talk about the scenarios of if they're going to go a different direction, and I think it would be malpractice given the value that we've seen on the quarterbacks here to not trade that pick, to stay at that pick. And I understand that Marvin Harrison Jr. is, I mean, we've called him a generational prospect. Other people have called him a generational prospect, but to take him at 3 when you can potentially get a quarterback package. And I continue to circle the Minnesota Vikings as a team that is going to be ultra aggressive, because I think that they look at themselves as recognizing where they are in their competitive cycle, knowing that they have a lot of money going to Justin Jefferson very, very soon. So to lock a young quarterback into that rookie contract is big for that franchise build there, and allow that young core to grow together with Jordan Addison as a first-round pick last year. And having the skill position pieces, TJ Hawkinson, when he makes a comeback, Aaron Jones in that backfield there, that franchise is really set up well for a rookie quarterback to dump in there. And that them moving up to pick 23, and I circle that and I look at that because it's interesting to me that kind of when you look at the time frame of the way some of these things are playing out, because it was right about the same day that I think that the odds started to swing harder towards May being potentially that second pick, that we really started to hear those first rumors that the Patriots would be open to I don't know if it'd have to be a Godfather offer or what it would have to be, but they would be open to a pick at a trade at number 3, which in my mind kind of tells me that maybe some things have gotten leaked or they've heard something that's somewhat credible, and that they're kind of thinking, well, if May's off the board, then yeah, we would be open to that deal. And that's where, and then for Daniels too, I come back to the Vikings again, because there was a rumor after the draft last year that they were going all in on Anthony Richardson to get that athletic quarterback that could potentially be just a different look for their franchise. And then you got an LSU kid sitting there with Justin Jefferson. I know the ties run pretty deep on that LSU program. That could make Jefferson a little bit more happy in terms of getting him signed to that long-term deal. And so I think that's where my wheels start to turn a little bit on who's going to be there at number 3 and what the Patriots are going to do with that pick.
Yeah, you guys said it all. I'm not, in terms of, I think it really starts there where you're at. I really feel like it's the quarterback in terms of which quarterback do you think. You really got to know which quarterback Washington's going to take. And then you feel comfortable kind of winging it and kind of going with your favorite pick there in terms of, is it Daniels or McCarthy, or, do you think May drops there? I think the interesting team is the Cardinals. So they're at pick 4. Cardinals are always one to move. They did it last year. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but we've been doing through our Patreon some NFL mocks. I was a Cardinals manager, GM at one point. I moved back. I was able to get Franklin and Worthy, but I added like Dallas Turner. I added like Nate Wiggins. I added other guys there. Instead of grabbing that elite wide receiver, I grabbed more pieces, because the Cardinals definitely need pieces, especially on that offense. Then with the extra draft picks, I was able to go after running back. I think I got Trey Benson or whoever it was. So like when you're looking at the Cardinals, they're very adept at moving back and forth and kind of going through there. Right now, the odds is Marvin Harrison Jr. is minus 225. He's the favorite. JJ's at plus 180, Drake's at plus 900, Jaden Daniels at plus 1500. Because if a team moves up, they're moving up more than likely for a quarterback in that spot. I don't love the Marvin Harrison Jr. minus 225 because I don't love those odds. I feel like, yeah, he probably will go there, but I don't really love the odds there anyway. If you had to guess, Christian, best educated guess, you've written like 17,000 mocks this offseason. What do you think the Cardinals do?
I think they stick and pick. It's really hard for me to say this team who they already have too much draft capital, arguably. Not too much. You never have too much draft capital, but they have a lot of draft capital. Moving back doesn't do a whole lot for them in terms of like setting them up for the future because they're already set up really well. I've never, I guess maybe the Bears this year with 1-9, but in terms of like a team most set up to make an actual legitimate championship run here, this team has the draft assets to do that. But at some level, you just have to start taking the great players. And so with the best player on anyone's board, and really, I think a lot of NFL teams are going to have Marvin Harrison Jr. as the number one prospect, especially if they don't need a quarterback. With the best player in the draft sitting there, it's really hard for me to move back. One scenario that I've seen to counteract that point is, okay, you move back and then you trade back up because they did it last year with Paris Johnson. I think that's viable, especially since the Chargers seemingly want to move out of 5. But that's really risky. You have to set that trade up at 5 before you move out because, I guess all 4 quarterbacks would be gone in this scenario, but I just stay and pick Marvin Harrison Jr. Don't be silly. You've already got another first-round pick. Just take someone else there. Calm down. Calm down, Cardinals.
To entertain the deals, that tells me that they've got multiple players grouped at least somewhat together that they're comfortable with walking out of. And I think that's my biggest takeaway on that. And I think it's, as much as we, again, go back to thinking that Marvin Harrison Jr. is a top of 101 of wide receivers, board teams have different needs and teams have different things that they're looking for in a wide receiver. I happen to think that with Drew Penzick coming in and bringing a little bit more of those bigger receivers, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. is a bigger receiver, but the physicality that Cleveland's had in their receiver room, Urmudunze is an interesting scheme fit, I think, for a Cardinals offense, and especially given the needs that they have there. But he's not Marvin Harrison Jr., but you do bring up an interesting point in terms of maneuvering down the board. And I look at the Giants sitting there at 6, and the Giants and my tinfoil hat conspiracy is that the Giants are at 6. If you are looking at multiple players in a tier, that's a perfect landing spot, I think, for the Cardinals in a trade back, because you could be even looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. still at number 6, depending on what the Chargers decide to do, and especially if all the quarterbacks are off the board. So if you're able to step back to 6 and really look at similar tiered players, or you kind of look at it and say, well, Marvin Harrison Jr. might be there, or maybe the Giants are going to play us and take Marvin Harrison Jr., but still then we might be trading J.J. McCarthy at the number 6 pick. There's a lot of different options that are available. I think you make an interesting point with the draft capital, and I think the one thing on that is one of my favorite things to do in a startup, if I am going to trade back, is to make sure it's like almost sandwich those, bring up the bottom end a little bit more and get up into higher tier players. And you can always bring that bottom tier up a little bit more. And a lot of what teams don't want to trade a 2-for-1 in terms of the draft. They want to have something coming back, and they might be more open to that if you are able to send them back that 4th or that extra 5th that you might have, and be able to kind of move multiple players into a higher level tier. And I think that potentially is on the board. The other thing too is the ability, especially if it's going to be a quarterback at pick 4, JJ McCarthy, a team like Denver that's desperate to go out and get there, or Minnesota, whoever it might be, you continue to roll those assets forward. And that's one of the things the Bears did the last couple of years, of have those multiple picks in multiple years and to continue to roll and snowball that. So I think there are arguments to be made, but I absolutely hear you in terms of adding elite top tier players, and Harrison Jr. would be that for the Cardinals.
All right. So we're talking about wide receivers anyway. So we'll jump over to the number 5 pick. The Chargers are sitting there at number 5, and I think they're fascinating what they're going to do, because I've heard the arguments all offseason, and honestly, I'm done with it. I'm so tired of listening to Charger fans, and luckily Bears fans are over, but Charger fans, y'all need to get a grip. You guys got to relax, because you guys don't even like each other. Like the way you guys fight, on social media. It drives me crazy. And there's only like 20 of you. I'm just kidding, Chargers fans. There's like 100. So when you're looking at what they have, so I saw somebody arguing back and forth saying that they won't take a wide receiver because Josh Palmer has looked good and they expect a breakout from Quentin Johnson. You can expect that all you want, and Josh Palmer might be better than what the consensus thinks he is, but you got to get something in that room. You don't really even have a tight end in terms of what they like to do in that. I know they went out and signed guys, but I mean, like a real playmaker there. I know that they're out there. They've really been going after running backs, Gus, JK, those guys. Like we've seen that, but you'd expect them to have to get a playmaker. I do think that there's some either ways to trade back, though, and still stay in that top 10-ish range, probably, or 11-ish. So you may be able to get a playmaker there. Maybe they just move back. I think there's a scenario where they could collect assets, maybe go get Brock if they wanted to later. But it's hard for me to see them not take an offensive lineman or a wide receiver in this draft. Right now, pick 5, Malik Neighbors is plus 230. Marvin Harrison's plus 250. JJ's plus 250. Joe Alt is plus 475. I kind of like the Alt line because you're still getting plus 47.5 odds, and if they stay there, I really think he might be the pick, as much as Chargers fans hate that scenario there. But are you guaranteeing this pick to be trade back, Christian?
Not guaranteeing, but I would almost guess that that's their preferred outcome. And I think should the Patriots stay and pick a quarterback at 3 and the Cardinals won't move off because they want Marvin Harrison Jr., I think that 5 is open for business. And that's when the Vikings can pounce, because I think everyone kind of knows that the Chargers want to move back and everyone knows that the Vikings want to move up. So, and it could be another team. Maybe the Broncos get super desperate and send literally every pick they have because they don't have many. Maybe they get a little crazy doing that. But to me, this is the trade back situation. It's hard for me to imagine that Trey Pipkins is their starting right tackle week 1. No matter how they go about fixing that, they have an early second round pick as well. NFL fans, remember, your teams do pick more than just once. I think that's an important distinction to make here, because they could take a wide receiver here, but you mentioned it. They have to at least get a tight end, right? I think this is a sneaky stay and pick Brock Bowers in the top 5. Brock Bowers is I think that's a little rich for what we consider tight ends, but I mean, George Kittle comp in the rookie guide, nasty, tenacious type of player, exactly what you would think of for a Harbaugh player. So to me, like, him not even being listed on those odds means that his odds are pretty long. I might just dabble a little bit in that, and if they can't move back, maybe that's the move.
That's spicy. I mean, I hear you though, but I think that simple economics would say that wide receiver is a smarter pick at 5 than a tight end, but I understand the value within that offensive scheme for a tight end.
Go tell Harbaugh that right now to his face, Jeff Bell, because Harbaugh is not hearing that. He loves his tight ends.
I think also you can make an argument that economically, when you use Bowers and as your wide receiver 1, I think you're getting a value there, right? And then you're getting a value long term on that contract, even though you're paying top 5 money. Like, you're paying a tight end as a top 10 tight end in the league at that point. But I think we would all make the argument that Bowers can be that next year and have a Sam Laporta type of impact as early as his rookie year. So I think there's an argument to be made. I wouldn't throw a lot of money on that happening, because I do think that they want to trade out. So
if we get to the end of night 1 and they've taken a tackle, what is the overnight dynasty value for Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer?
I don't think it really matters for Quentin Johnson. No. I think Josh Palmer will get a bump a little bit. Yeah. People hate Quentin Johnson, so it won't matter. They think, I mean, it maybe goes up a half a round, but I don't think he's worth anything right now. It's the 3rd, maybe, if anybody would give you a 3rd.
I would recommend not being in a dynasty startup while the NFL draft's going on. That's my recommendation for dynasty players out there. But I also just don't think they get out of day 2 without a wide receiver either. So
yeah, and there's a lot of good wide receivers here.
Yeah,
go get Jalen Polk. I'm still standing on that train. And the other thing to note, in 2025, there's some wide receivers out there from free agent perspective. Waddle's got a club option. and in the draft too, Luther Burden, Ted McMillan. There's guys that, we have Evan Stewart. We haven't talked about some of these guys. We will. But hey, Chris Godwin is out there. Like there's Deontay will probably, or I know he just got that deal. But you have some other guys out there that they might want to take a shot on. So like there are ways for them to kind of go out there. All right, pick 6, because we're running a little bit slower here. Quarterback, maybe with the Giants. I know, we flirted with this a little bit. Jeff has talked about it a little bit. The best odds here are Malik Neighbors plus 150, Rome Odunze plus 250, JJ plus 500, Joe Alt plus 850. Really feels like a wide receiver goes here. If Malik's on the board, it's hard for me not to think that they go Malik here. And I think he fits their system. I would love for him to kind of be in that Diggs role, into ball system and kind of just be that guy that's going to get peppered with targets. I think he's fun for Rondale Robinson there. Waller, if he's healthy. That's a better offense than what we've seen. I know they need offensive line help. They were one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL as well. So it's going to be interesting to see where they kind of roll there. Do you think there's any shot they go offensive line, Jeff?
No, I think that they're committed to getting a playmaker if it's not a quarterback.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're going to run it back with Evan Neal. I think it was stupid to take Evan Neal in the first place, and I think that they probably should not run it back with Evan Neal, or at least kick him to guard. Do something. He's not a tackle. This seems like it's a wide receiver. Like I said, I think Odunze. My argument is, okay, you've got Wan'Dale. He's a little speed guy. You got Jalen Hyatt. He's a little speed guy. I know Neighbors is more dynamic than both of those players and much, much better. But we talk about building a basketball starting 5 out here, and they don't have that right now. They just have a lot of the same wide receiver, and we've kind of, pinned that on them for 2 years now, and Neighbors just feels a little redundant to me. That said, he's my wide receiver 2. So if they take wide receiver 2 and they just say we're going to scrap the other situations, like Darius Slayton holding out, what a guy. Holding out.
That's the weirdest holdout ever. That is like
guy.
He's probably like going around, hey, see all this money people got? Jerry Jeudy got what? Man, I deserve a little bit more than that. Like, I feel like he's looking around, but I don't feel like anybody thought that you should allow Darius Slayton.
No, but yeah, it's wide receiver, I think.
I don't know that it matters, but do you think, where would the league want Marvin Harrison Jr. playing between the Giants and the Cardinals?
Or Jeff is really on Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Giants. This is a thing.
It seems like a thing. I don't
really think they care, to be honest with you. Poor, I don't know how much. How much that matters.
Really, I think it's the Chargers that they would want him. They want Justin Herbert to. Hey, who you propping up? Daniel Jones? Come on. No, it's Drew Lock, baby. We can prop up
Marvin Harrison Jr. on the cover of the program there. So.
All right. So I'm going to run through the next 4 picks, and then you guys talk about which one you like. Number 7 pick, that's the Titans. Are they going to move back? Or where are they at? Joe Alt sitting there at minus 165. Roman Malik plus 650, plus 700. Really feels like a smash Joe Alt. If he's there and the Titans don't take him, I feel like the Titans are just the Titans again. Number 8 pick, I think that's the interesting one. A lot of different ways the Falcons could go there. But Latu plus 200, Dallas Turner plus 210, Rome Odunze plus 600 there. Number 9 pick, Chicago's there. Will they use that capital to move up and go get Marvin Harrison Jr., which I think would be a lot of fun for Chicago? I don't know about fantasy managers, how much they would love that. But Rome Odunze plus 140, Jared Verse plus 600, Byron Murphy plus 600, and Dallas Turner plus 750. And then at number 10, we have the Jets, Brock Bowers plus 150. Oh, man. Troy Fondue at plus 700, Rome Odunze at plus 700. And then, Christian, how do you pronounce that?
Lisa Fuaga.
That's my man.
Fuanga, actually. It's kind of like Tonga Vailoa. There's a little silent N in there.
Fuanga at plus 650. All right, Jeff, pick one that you want to talk about. Go ahead.
I just think it's interesting that when you look at, I'm going to talk about 2 here real quick, but when you look at Rome Odunze odds at number 9, well, when you look at Rome Odunze odds at number 9 and you look at Brock Bowers odds at number 10, if your team's sitting there and saying, and Neighbors and Harrison Jr. are off the board at pick 8, and you're the Falcons you're looking at the teams maybe that you can fall back into and still get one of these players that you're favored to go get at that number 8 pick, and you're the team saying, well, Odunze is going to go to number 9 to the Bears. If I want him, go get him right now. And that seems like a clear trade point. And if that were to happen, then you're also the Bears looking at these defensive players that have similar odds. And maybe you're a team like the Colts or somebody like that says, well, Brock Bowers is going to go 10 to the Jets. If I want him, let's go get him right now. And I think the Bears are, as much talk as there has been about them moving up, they only have 4 picks in this draft. And I think that if they can move into the teens and still get one of these defensive players and continue, like, build that war chest just a little bit more, I think they really have to strongly consider that.
As a Bears fan, I desperately want them to move back and then take Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy is my number 6 player on my big board. I think that is a star defensive tackle that immediately elevates that defense. Quickly, I think this is the run on offensive tackle. I think, number 10, I think Bowers should be the favorite, but I think the run on offensive tackles is going to start right after this group. And so I think you could see someone move up to 8 to get J.C. Latham or Olu Fashanu or whoever it may be, whoever that OT2 is. And then, maybe someone panics and sends a little bit more than they need to 9 to get an offensive tackle, because as we just talked about, the Jets' second and third favorite odds are also offensive tackle. And I think it makes a lot of sense from a team building perspective to do that. So I think that could be where we see a lot of those this is an elite tackle class. And unfortunately for the tackles, it's also an elite wide receiver and a really good quarterback class. So I think we're going to see a lot of offensive players going in the top 20. It's going to be really exciting. Brock Bowers to the Jets is locked in my final mock draft. So I think that's my other take here. It's a lock.
It really feels like if this was an old school draft, offensive tackles would have been the 4 of the top 6, maybe. Like, that's how good these guys are in terms of, and whoever's going to get Olu from Penn State, I love that kid. I've loved him for 2 years. I wish he would have came out last year. I really like him. I think that, he's a lot of fun there. The interesting one for me is I think that pick 8 has some value. I know a lot of people think maybe Atlanta kind of moves around a little bit and, they look at it. But remember, they just gave Kirk Cousins a boatload of money. If they went out and kind of surrounded him with people, they really need, to me, some type of edge, defensive edge. They were dead last in pass rush win rate. Can try to get at that. Speak that. I can't talk right now, but they're really bad at pass rush. That's what I get for trying to do stats on this show. And then last year, they had 42 sacks. They still finished 21st in the NFL. They need to get after the quarterback, and they kind of have the pieces on offense, but they definitely need a defensive piece there. So then what DN do you like the best? Who's rated the highest for you, Christian?
I have Dallas Turner 1, but Laiatu is the most ready to play. And if I'm a team that is comfortable with his medicals, I would rather go a little bit safer with that skill set, especially if I'm looking to make a championship run. If I'm building, a team like the Broncos could use a Dallas Turner because the cupboards are pretty bare. But the Falcons, to me, Latu makes a ton of sense.
I love Turner, but I
do
get
too.
it. Like
He's my one.
I think that I really think an edge is going there. I really think that they're going to really try hard. They tried to kind of fill some gaps in second, third round, but to me, go get Turner, Latu, these guys in that range, and really add that to that defensive side. All right. Any final thoughts, Jeff? Top 10?
No, I don't believe that. I think we did a pretty encompassing walk through all of it. So I'm curious if the Falcons if the Falcons trade out at 8, when do you think the first defensive player is going to go? Because we could get into like the early to mid teens before a defensive player goes off the board.
The Raiders, I think.
Corner, but also they need an offensive tackle. So it's like,
I feel like the Raiders have needed an offensive tackle for like a decade. I feel like they've needed they've struggled at that position.
Fuanga fits so well. So does J.C. Latham if he's there. So we'll see. But the full version of every show can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show.